You're with CHRONOS. We don't just tell history, we take you there. Tonight, we stand in a world that is ending. Not with fire falling from the sky, not with armies at the gates, not yet. Tonight, in the spring of 184 CE, the Han dynasty is dying the way empires always die, slowly, from the inside, one broken promise at a time. Here's the question that will haunt this entire night. What does it feel like when heaven itself turns away? The Chinese have a concept for this. They call it the mandate of heaven, Tianming. It is not a metaphor. It is not poetry. For 400 years, the Han emperors ruled because heaven approved. The crops grew. The rivers flowed within their banks. The barbarians stayed beyond the borders. Order prevailed. But when heaven withdraws its mandate, the signs are unmistakable. The earth trembles. The Yellow River floods. Children are born with two heads. The sun turns red at midday. And the people, the millions who have endured drought and famine and taxation without complaint, finally rise. This is the story of that rising. This is the story of the Yellow Turban Rebellion, the corrupt eunuchs who strangled an empire, the warlords who carved it into pieces, and the scholars who watched 4 centuries of civilization collapse into chaos. This is the night the Han dynasty learned that heaven listens to the hungry. You stand in Luoyang, the capital, in the Eastern Han Palace complex. The year is 184 CE. The walls around you are 12 meters high, painted imperial red, topped with yellow glazed tiles that shimmer like gold in the afternoon sun. The palace grounds cover nearly 6 square kilometers. There are audience halls where 1,000 officials can gather, libraries containing tens of thousands of scrolls, gardens with artificial lakes and imported trees, workshops where jade carvers and silk weavers and bronze casters produce luxuries for the court. But something is wrong. You can feel it in the air, thick with incense that cannot quite mask the smell of rot. You can see it in the faces of the officials hurrying through the corridors, their silk robes immaculate but their eyes haunted. You can hear it in the whispers that stop abruptly when the wrong person approaches. The empire is 400 years old. It has survived rebellions before, invasions, famines, floods. It has survived bad emperors and palace coups and border wars. But this time feels different. This time, the center is not holding. Let's go back 3 months. Winter, 184 CE. The Yellow River Valley, Jizhou Province. The Yellow River is not behaving. It has flooded 3 times in the past decade, each time worse than the last. The river carries so much loess sediment from the highlands that its water is literally yellow, thick, heavy, mineral-rich. When it floods, it doesn't just overflow. It changes course entirely, abandoning its old bed and carving a new one across farmland and villages. Entire regions are destroyed. Hundreds of thousands drown or starve. The government's response is inadequate. Dikes are built, but they're poorly maintained. Corruption means construction money disappears into officials' pockets. The dikes fail. The river floods again. The cycle repeats. In a village near Guangzhou, a man named Zhang Ju watches his neighbors starve. He is in his 40s, educated enough to read but poor enough to understand hunger. He has traveled, studied with Taoist hermits, learned herbalism and basic medicine. He has returned to find his home province devastated by floods, overtaxed by a government that demands grain it knows the people don't have, exploited by landlords who have bought up ruined farms for nothing and now rent them back at impossible rates. Zhang Ju begins to preach. He calls his teaching the way of supreme peace, Taiping Dao. It is a blend of Taoism, folk religion, faith healing, and revolution. He tells the desperate that their suffering is not random. The Han dynasty has lost the mandate of heaven. The current emperor, a child puppet controlled by eunuchs, is illegitimate. Heaven itself demands change. He performs healings. He uses talismans, strips of paper inscribed with protective characters, burned and mixed with water for the sick to drink. Some people recover. Whether this is faith, coincidence, or genuine medicinal knowledge mixed into his formulas doesn't matter. What matters is that people believe. And belief, in a world where the government offers nothing but more taxation, spreads like wildfire. Zhang Ju recruits followers. He sends out disciples, He will later claim he has 36, echoing Buddhist and Taoist numerology. They travel through Jizhou and beyond, preaching the way of supreme peace, healing the sick, and organizing the desperate. They identify each other by wearing yellow cloths as headbands. Yellow is the color of earth, of the center in Chinese cosmology, of change and renewal. They become known as the Yellow Turbans. By early 184 CE, Zhang commands hundreds of thousands of followers. Perhaps more. The numbers are impossible to verify, but even conservative estimates suggest he has organized at least 360,000 people across 8 provinces. This is not a peasant mob. This is a coordinated network with discipline, ideology, and apocalyptic urgency. Zhang names the year. The year 184 by the Han calendar is Jiazi, the first year in the 60-year cycle, a moment of cosmic reset. This is the appointed time. The blue heaven, the current cosmic era, is over. The yellow heaven, the era of supreme peace, begins now. The date is set, the 5th day of the 3rd month. Simultaneously, across 8 provinces, the yellow turbans will rise. Government offices will be seized. Granaries will be opened. Landlords will be killed. The corrupt officials will be driven out. The Han dynasty will fall, and from its ashes, a new order will emerge. But someone talks. Luoyang, early spring, 184 C. The imperial court receives word of the planned uprising. A yellow turban follower in the capital, perhaps having second thoughts, reports the conspiracy. Panic ensues. The young emperor, Emperor Ling, barely 20 years old, is controlled entirely by the eunuchs who run the palace. The eunuchs are terrified. They know they are hated. They know that if the government falls, they will be among the first killed. Emergency orders go out. Arrest known Yellow Turban sympathizers in the capital. Send urgent dispatches to provincial governors. Raise troops, secure granaries, prepare for rebellion. The cavalry general Lu Ji is dispatched north with the best available forces. Other generals are mobilized. The government, corrupt and decayed as it is, still has resources. The Han army, though weakened, is not helpless. But the order to suppress the rebellion arrives too late to prevent it. On the appointed day, across hundreds of kilometers, the Yellow Turbans rise. In Jizhou, in Yenzhou, in Qinzhou, in Shuzhou, in Yuzhou, in Jingzhou, in Yangzhou, in Yizhou, in cities and towns and villages, men and women wearing yellow headbands storm government buildings, open granaries, kill officials, and proclaim the end of the Han. The violence is immediate and brutal. For centuries of resentment explode. Local magistrates are dragged from their offices and beaten to death in the streets. Tax collectors are torn apart. Landlords' houses are burned. In some places, entire families of the wealthy are killed, men, women, children. The Yellow Turbans are not an army. They are a revolution, and revolutions are not tidy. But they also organize. Zhang declares himself the general of heaven. His brothers Zhang Bao and Zhang Liang become the general of earth and the general of humanity. They divide their forces. They lay siege to cities. In some areas they succeed, capturing county seats, controlling territory, setting up their own administrations. They redistribute grain. They suspend taxation. For brief, chaotic weeks, the yellow heaven seems to be arriving. The Han response is slow but overwhelming. Lu Ji reaches Guangzhou with an army of professional soldiers, cavalry, armored infantry, crossbowmen. The Yellow Turbans, for all their numbers, are poorly armed. They have farming tools, improvised spears, a few stolen weapons. They have courage and conviction but little training. When they meet the Han army in open battle, they are slaughtered. Still, they keep fighting. Zhang followers believe they are protected by magic, by talismans, by the favor of heaven. When they die, the survivors interpret it as martyrdom, as necessary sacrifice. The rebellion does not collapse immediately. It fragments into dozens of smaller uprisings, guerrilla bands, local warlords claiming the Yellow Turban name. The fighting spreads. It will continue in one form or another for more than 20 years. But something irreversible has happened. The government's authority is shattered. Provincial governors, given emergency powers to raise their own armies, discover they now command forces loyal to them personally, not to the distant emperor. Ambitious men realize the empire is weak. And in Luoyang, the emperor and his eunuch advisors make a series of decisions that will destroy what remains. Let's talk about the eunuchs. In the Han court, eunuchs are not merely servants. They are a parallel power structure. Castrated men, forbidden to have descendants, are theoretically unable to found their own dynasties. This makes them, in theory, safe to trust with power. Emperors rely on them as counterweights to the scholar officials, the Confucian bureaucrats who otherwise dominate the government. But by the late Eastern Han, the eunuchs control everything. They control access to the emperor. They arrange imperial marriages. They oversee finances. They sell offices to the highest bidder. A provincial governorship can be purchased. A military command can be bought. Merit means nothing. Connections to the right eunuch mean everything. The most powerful eunuchs, the 10 attendants, as they are called, live in opulent mansions within the palace complex. They wear silk. They collect art. They command private armies of retainers. They are, in all but name, the real rulers of the empire. Emperor Ling, the current ruler, openly calls the chief eunuch Zhang Rang father. Zhang Rang has more actual power than any scholar official, any general, anyone except the emperor himself, and the emperor is a puppet. The scholar officials hate the eunuchs with a passion that borders on obsession. Not just because the eunuchs are corrupt, everyone is corrupt, to some degree, but because the eunuchs represent a fundamental violation of Confucian order. They are not educated in the classics. They do not embody the virtues of the gentleman scholar. They have no family, no lineage, no stake in the continuity of civilization. They are, in the eyes of the scholars, parasites. This hatred has erupted into violence before. In 166 and 169 CE, scholar officials attempted purges of eunuch influence. Both times, the eunuchs struck back, arresting and executing hundreds of scholars in what became known as the disasters of the partisan prohibitions. Families were destroyed. Brilliant men were tortured to death. The Confucian scholar class learned that opposing the eunuchs directly meant death. But after the Yellow Turban Rebellion begins, the calculation changes. The generals sent to suppress the rebellion are mostly from scholar official families. They command armies. They have loyal troops. And they are far from the capital, beyond the eunuchs' direct control. Power, in 184 CE, is shifting from the palace to the provinces, from the bureaucrats to the warlords. One man will come to embody this shift more than any other, Dong Zhuo. Dong Zhuo is not from the elite. He is from Liang province, the northwestern frontier, a harsh land of steppes and mountains where survival requires strength, not scholarship. He is a military man, a cavalry commander, a man who speaks bluntly and cares nothing for Confucian etiquette. He is also ruthlessly effective. When sent to suppress remnants of the Yellow Turban Rebellion and deal with border incursions by the Chang tribes, he succeeds through brutal efficiency. His soldiers are loyal. His enemies are terrified. In 189 CE, Emperor Ling dies. He is only 33. His death creates a succession crisis. He has 2 sons by different mothers, and the eunuchs and the scholar officials back different candidates. The conflict erupts into violence. The general He Jin, brother of one of the emperor's consorts, leads a faction of scholar officials who decide the time has come to eliminate the eunuchs entirely. He summons Dong Zhuo and other provincial generals to march on the capital with their armies, intending to use military force to cow the eunuchs into submission. The eunuchs strike first. They assassinate He Jin inside the palace. Chaos erupts. He Jin's officers, enraged, storm the palace complex and begin massacring every eunuch they can find. The violence is indiscriminate. Old men, young boys, anyone suspected of being a eunuch is killed. Some are thrown from palace walls. Some are hunted through the gardens and cut down. Hundreds die in a matter of hours. The young emperor, now Emperor Shao, barely a teenager, flees the palace with his brother, escorted by a handful of loyal attendants. They are lost, terrified children running through a burning capital. Dong Zhuo, arriving with his army, finds them outside the city. He brings them back. He presents himself as their savior, the strong man who will restore order. Within days, Dongzhuo deposes Emperor Shao and installs the younger brother as Emperor Xian. He appoints himself chancellor, the highest military and civil office. He fills key positions with his own men. He stations his troops throughout Luoyang. He effectively seizes control of the empire. The scholar officials are horrified. Dongzhuo is a barbarian in their eyes, a frontier thug who knows nothing of proper governance. He is also cruel. He orders executions for trivial reasons. He publicly insults ministers. He parades through the capital with armed guards, making it clear that power now flows from the sword, not from Confucian virtue. A coalition of regional warlords forms to oppose him. They march on Luoyang in 190 CE, commanding armies that dwarf Dongzhuo's forces. Dongzhuo makes a decision that will haunt Chinese memory for centuries. He burns Luoyang. Imagine the capital burning. Luoyang has been a major city for over 1,000 years. It was the capital of the Zhou dynasty, rebuilt and expanded under the Han. Its population is perhaps 500,000. Its palaces and temples and libraries contain the accumulated wealth and knowledge of 4 centuries. The imperial tombs are nearby, generations of emperors resting in elaborate mausoleums filled with jade suits, bronze vessels, terracotta figures, treasures meant to last eternity. Dongzhuo orders it all destroyed. He forces the entire population to evacuate. Those who refuse or cannot move fast enough are killed. The palaces are looted, then burned. The libraries, scrolls and bamboo books recording history, philosophy, ritual, poetry, are thrown into the flames. Tombs are opened and plundered. The city burns for days. The smoke is visible for 100 kilometers. Dongzhuo relocates the court to Chang'an, the old Western Han capital. He brings the emperor as his prisoner. The coalition that was marching to stop him hesitates. Luoyang, the symbolic heart of the empire, is gone. Without it, what exactly are they trying to restore? The coalition fractures. The warlords, nominally united against Dongzhuo, discover they have conflicting interests. Some want to rescue the emperor. Some want power for themselves. Some see an opportunity to grab territory while everyone else is distracted. The alliance collapses without fighting a major battle. The warlords return to their home provinces and begin, gradually, to act as independent rulers. In 192 CE, Dongzhuo is assassinated by his own subordinate, Lu Bu, in a conspiracy organized by the minister Wang Yun. But this does not restore order. Dongzhuo's former generals fight over his territories. The Han government, now in Chang'an, controls almost nothing. The emperor is a puppet passed between warlords. And across the empire, regional strongmen consolidate power. The Han dynasty still exists, technically. But it is a shell. Real power belongs to men like Cao Cao in the north, Sun Tzu in the south, Liu Biao in the center, Yuan Shao in the northeast. These men command their own armies, collect their own taxes, appoint their own officials. They pay lip service to the emperor when convenient and ignore him when not. The empire has fractured into dozens of competing domains. The era of the warlords has begun. And from this chaos, 3 kingdoms will eventually emerge. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's go back to what it felt like to live through this. You are a farmer in Yenzhou province in 190 CE. You have 20 mu of land, about 3 acres, that your family has worked for generations. The land is not yours. You rent it from a landlord whose family has owned this region since the Emperor Wu's conquests 2 centuries ago. You pay half your harvest as rent. You pay additional taxes to the government. In a good year, what remains is barely enough to feed your family. In a bad year, you borrow grain and hope next year is better. The Yellow Turban Rebellion passes through your region. You do not join them, but you do not oppose them either. When they open the government granary and distribute grain, you take some. When they burn the landlord's house, you watch. When the Han army arrives and defeats them, you bow to the new authority and return to your fields. But the soldiers do not leave. They are stationed nearby now, and they require feeding. The government demands a special tax to support the troops. You cannot pay. Officials come to confiscate part of your harvest. You argue. They beat you. Your wife brings the grain to avoid worse. The next year, different soldiers arrive. These belong to a warlord who is fighting the first warlord. They also demand food. They also take your grain. They take your ox. They take your daughter. You never see her again. The year after that, there is drought. The harvest fails. You have nothing to pay rent with. The landlord's agent tells you the land is forfeit. You are now a tenant at will, which means you can be evicted whenever convenient. You are, effectively, a serf. You consider fleeing. Many families have left, abandoning their fields, heading for regions they have heard are safer or where warlords are recruiting settlers. But you are old. Your wife is sick. You have nowhere to go. You stay. You survive by eating bark and roots. The next spring, you plant again, because what else can you do? This is the reality for millions. The grand narratives, warlords and battles and political intrigue, matter, but they matter from a distance. What matters immediately is whether you eat, whether your children live, whether armed men leave you alone. The collapse of the Han Dynasty is not an abstract historical event. It is your daughter disappearing, your ox stolen, your land taken, your family scattered. The death toll is staggering. Population records from the late Eastern Han show approximately 56 million people under Han administration. By the end of the Three Kingdoms period, 60 years later, census figures show approximately 16 million. Even accounting for refugees fleeing beyond government control and statistical errors, the implication is clear: tens of millions died. War, famine, disease, displacement. An entire generation obliterated. But amid the collapse, something else is happening. New powers are rising, and some of them are trying, genuinely, to restore order. Cao Cao is one of these men. He is from a family of questionable background. His father was adopted by a eunuch, which taints Cao Cao in the eyes of the old aristocracy. But Cao Cao is brilliant. He is a skilled military commander, a talented poet, a ruthless pragmatist. In 196 CE, he rescues the emperor from warlords who had been holding him hostage and brings him to Su, a city in Cao Cao's territory. This is genius. Cao Cao now controls the emperor. Every order he issues can be issued in the emperor's name. His rivals are not fighting Cao Cao, they are rebelling against the emperor. He has legitimacy. And he uses it ruthlessly. He conquers the north, defeating or absorbing rival warlords. He implements agricultural reforms, settling refugees on government lands, organizing collective farming, restoring irrigation systems. His territory, while not peaceful, is more stable than most. Cao Cao is also brutal. He massacres cities that resist. He executes thousands. But he also rewards competence. He promotes talented men regardless of background. He writes poetry that expresses genuine sorrow for the suffering of the people. He is a contradiction, a cynical realist who mourns the collapse of civilization while benefiting from it. In the south, Sun Tzu carves out a domain in the Yangtze River Delta. The south is richer, more fertile, less devastated by war. Sun Tzu is young, charismatic, a brilliant battlefield commander. He conquers territory through a combination of military force and strategic marriage alliances. When he is assassinated in 200 CE, his younger brother Sun Quan takes over and consolidates control. The Sun family will establish the kingdom of Wu, controlling the wealthiest region of China. In the southwest, Liu Bei claims descent from the imperial family. This is convenient but possibly true. The Han royal line has branched so many times over 4 centuries that distant cousins are everywhere. Liu Bei has virtually no resources. He is a minor warlord, constantly on the run, defeated repeatedly. But he has a reputation for benevolence. He treats people well. Talented men are drawn to him, including Zhuge Liang, one of the greatest strategists of the age. Liu Bei will eventually establish the kingdom of Shu, claiming to be the legitimate continuation of the Han. These 3 powers, Wei under Cao Cao, Wu under Sun Quan, Shu under Liu Bei, will emerge from the chaos as the 3 kingdoms. But that is still years away. For now, it is warlords and battles and suffering without end. In 208 CE, Cao Cao marches south with an army of perhaps 200,000 men, intending to conquer Sun Quan's territory and unify the empire under his control. Sun Quan and Liu Bei form an alliance to stop him. They meet at Red Cliffs, where the Yangtze River narrows. The Battle of Red Cliffs is one of the most famous in Chinese history. Cao Cao's army, northern men and used to river warfare, suffers from disease. His ships are chained together for stability, which makes them vulnerable. Sun Quan's commander, Zhou Yu, sends fire ships, boats loaded with flammable materials and set ablaze, drifting into Cao Cao's fleet. The wind is favorable. The fire spreads. Cao Cao's fleet burns. His army, trapped on the riverbank, is destroyed. Cao Cao flees north, barely escaping with his life. The battle ensures the division of China. Cao Cao will never again attempt a southern conquest. The Three Kingdoms pattern solidifies. The Han dynasty is still technically intact. The emperor is still alive, still issuing edicts in Cao Cao's name, but everyone knows it is over. The empire that lasted 4 centuries, that built the Great Wall, that conquered Central Asia, that established Confucianism as state ideology, that created a bureaucracy based on merit, that unified the Chinese script and standardized weights and measures, is finished. In 220 CE, Cao Cao dies. His son, Cao Pai, forces the emperor to abdicate and establishes the Wei dynasty. The Han ends not with conquest but with a signed document, a quiet ceremony, the emperor stepping down and accepting a noble title in the new regime. The last Han emperor, Emperor Xian, lives another 14 years as a private citizen. The Three Kingdoms era officially begins. It will last 60 years. The Three Kingdoms will fight constantly, none strong enough to conquer the others, none weak enough to be eliminated. Eventually, the kingdom of Wei will be usurped by the Sima family, who will establish the Jin dynasty and, briefly, reunify China. But that reunification will be fragile, and it will collapse into even worse chaos. So what does it feel like when heaven withdraws its mandate? It feels like watching 400 years of civilization dissolve in a single generation. It feels like the Yellow River flooding and no one coming to repair the dikes because the money was stolen. It feels like your daughter taken by soldiers and your ox confiscated and your land seized and having no one to appeal to because the government itself is gone. It feels like standing in the ruins of Luoyang, the ashes still warm, the smoke still rising, and realizing that the city that stood for 1,000 years is simply gone. It feels like libraries burning, history turning to smoke, knowledge lost forever. But it also feels like possibility. For the warlords, for the ambitious, for those willing to gamble everything, the collapse is an opportunity. Liu Bei starts with nothing and becomes a king. Zhuge Liang, a farmer's son, becomes the most famous strategist in Chinese history. Cao Cao, son of a eunuch's adopted heir, nearly unifies the empire. The fall of the Han teaches a lesson that China will remember for the next 2,000 years. Order is not natural. Civilization is not inevitable. It must be built, maintained, defended. When it collapses, the suffering is immense. But from the chaos, new order can emerge. The question is always, at what cost? The Three Kingdoms era becomes legendary. Centuries later, the stories will be collected into the romance of the Three Kingdoms, one of the great novels of Chinese literature. The warlords will become heroes and villains, their battles immortalized, their clever stratagems remembered and analyzed. Schoolchildren will memorize their names. Temples will be built to honor them. They will become mythology. But the people who actually lived through it, the farmers who starved, the women who were enslaved, the children who grew up in war zones, they left no monuments. Their names are not remembered. They are simply the tens of millions who died when heaven looked away. The Han dynasty lasted 4 centuries. Its collapse took 1 generation. The world it created, the roads, the cities, the institutions, the culture, survived in fragments, waiting to be reassembled. China would eventually reunify. But it would never be the same. This is history. Not myths. Not legends. Real people facing choices, real consequences, real suffering and real courage. An empire that seemed eternal, brought down by corruption, natural disaster, and the rage of the desperate. A government that lost the people's faith, and discovered that faith, once lost, cannot be commanded back. If you want more stories like this, stories that take you inside the moments that shaped our world, subscribe to CHRONOS. Hit the bell. Leave a comment telling us what you want to see next. Because history isn't just dates and dynasties. It's people. It's choices. It's the moment when everything changes and nothing will ever be the same. This is CHRONOS. We don't just tell history. We take you there. Until next time, remember that empires rise, empires fall, but the stories endure forever.